The roar of the crowd was a living thing, a hungry beast that consumed everything in its path. For Elvis Presley, standing on stage, bathed in the blinding glare of the spotlights, it was both a blessing and a curse. Tonight, like so many nights, the cheers felt like a physical weight, pressing down on him, stealing the very air from his lungs. His sequin jumpsuit, once a symbol of his dazzling success, now felt like a gilded cage trapping him in the persona the world demanded. He gripped the microphone, his fingers trembling slightly, hidden from the adoring eyes of thousands. He smiled, that famous magnetic smile, and launched into another song, his voice a powerful rumble that effortlessly filled the cavernous arena. On the surface, he was the king, commanding, confident, utterly in control. But inside, a different story was playing out. Just hours earlier, in the quiet solitude of his dressing room, the silence had been deafening. He'd stared at his reflection, really stared beyond the stage makeup and the meticulously styled hair. He saw a man who was tired, whose eyes held a weariness that went deeper than just lack of sleep. "Is this all there is?" he'd whispered, the words barely audible even to himself. Question hung in the air, a lonely echo in the luxurious space. He remembered the early days back in Tupelo, Mississippi, when music was pure joy. Singing in church, strumming his cheap guitar, dreaming of a life beyond the cotton fields. That raw, untamed passion had propelled him forward, fueled by a hunger to provide for his family, to give his mama the life she deserved. He'd wanted to be someone, to make a difference, and he had. Oh, how he had. It had morphed into a monstrous entity, demanding constant feeding. Every move, every word, every breath was scrutinized. He couldn't walk down a street, couldn't eat a meal, couldn't even share a private moment without the world watching, judging, wanting a piece of Elvis. Back on stage, the song ended and the applause intensified, a deafening wave of adoration. He bowed a graceful sweep of his arm and then moved into his signature. Dance moves, the ones that drove the fans wild. He saw their faces, a sea of yearning, loving, screaming faces. And for a fleeting moment, a wave of genuine warmth washed over him. He truly loved his fans. They were the reason he was here, the ones who had lifted him from obscurity. He felt a profound sense of gratitude, but then, just as quickly, the warmth was replaced by a familiar chill. These people loved Elvis, the myth, the legend, the gyrating showman. Did they see him? Did they see the boy who still loved comic books, who craved a simple conversation, who sometimes just wanted to sit on his porch and play his guitar without an audience? He closed his eyes for a split second, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The air backstage was thick with the smell of sweat, hairspray, and the lingering scent of stale cigarette smoke. His band members, his security detail, his manager, Colonel Tom Parker, they were all there. A constant presence, a protective bubble that also felt like a suffocating shell. "Elvis, you okay?" Joe Esposito, his friend and road manager, asked, his voice low with concern. Joe had been with him for years, one of the few who seemed to see beyond the facade. Elvis forced a smile. "Just a little warm, Joe. This jumpsuit ain't exactly breathable." Joe nodded, but his eyes lingered. He always knew when Elvis was wrestling with the invisible chains of fame. Later, as the limos sped away from the arena, the screams of the fans still echoing in the night, Elvis stared out the tinted window. The city lights blurred into streaks of color, a vibrant tapestry of life happening out there just beyond his reach. He was the most famous man in the world, yet he felt profoundly isolated. He thought of home, of Graceland, a mansion that was supposed to be his sanctuary, but often felt like another stage. The gates were always guarded, the walls always high. He longed for the days when he could just be plain old Elvis Presley. Not the king. He knew those days were long gone, probably forever, and the thought weighed heavily on his heart. A constant ache beneath the glamour and the glory. The golden cage, for all its splendor, was still a cage. And he was trapped inside the world, watching his every move, demanding more, always more. He leaned his head back against the plush seat, the exhaustion seeping into his bones. The music, the passion, the dreams, they were still there, buried deep. They were fighting for air against the immense pressure of being Elvis Presley. He wondered if he could ever truly escape, even for a moment, and just be himself again. The road ahead felt long and lonely despite the millions of adoring fans. Graceland wasn't just a house. It was a monument, a fortress, and sometimes a gilded prison. Elvis loved it truly, for it was the home he had bought for his beloved Mama Gladys and Daddy Vernon. Every luxurious detail, from the vibrant peacock stained glass to the famed jungle room, was a testament to his success. A symbol of the dreams he'd made real. Yet within its grand walls, the echoes of his fame resonated in unexpected ways. He woke late most mornings, the house already buzzing with activity. Cousins, friends, various hangers-on and security personnel milled about, a constant flurry of motion. There was always someone who needed something, a favor, a handout, an opinion. His generosity was legendary, a deep well that seemed to have no bottom, but sometimes he felt like he was being drained piece by piece. Breakfast, if he made it to the dining room, was rarely a quiet affair. Vernon, his father, would often be poring over financial reports, his brow furrowed with concern. Gladys had passed too soon, and Elvis missed her gentle presence, the one person who had truly understood the boy beneath the dazzling veneer. Now it was just him and the demands. "Elvis, we've got a meeting with the Colonel this afternoon about the new movie contract," Joe Esposito might say, breaking through his thoughts, and then a costume fitting for the Vegas show. Or his cousin Jean, always quick with a request, "Hey, El, think we could get new custom bikes for the boys? The old ones are kind of beat." Elvis would nod, his mind already spinning movies, Vegas recording sessions, touring, new bikes. It never stopped. He tried to please everyone, to say yes, to be the benevolent king they expected. But the weight of those expectations was growing heavier each day. He'd often retreat to his private upstairs sanctuary, a space where few were allowed without invitation. There, surrounded by books on spirituality, philosophy, and history, he sought a different kind of peace. He'd read for hours, trying to understand the universe, his place in it, and the strange, often contradictory nature of human existence. He yearned for knowledge, for answers that fame couldn't provide. One afternoon, he was strumming his guitar in the music room, lost in a new melody. It was a mournful tune reflecting the quiet melancholy that often settled over him. He was just humming the lyrics, feeling the music flow through him, when the door creaked open. "Elvis?" It was Priscilla, his wife, her voice soft but with an edge of concern. "The Colonel's here. He've been waiting for almost an hour." Elvis sighed, the melody dying on his lips. He laid the guitar gently on its stand, the unfinished song hanging in the air. The music, his true passion, was often relegated to stolen moments, squeezed in between the relentless demands of his career. He tried to be a good husband, a good father to Lisa Marie. But the demands on his time and energy were immense. He was constantly traveling, performing, recording. When he was home, he was exhausted or surrounded by his entourage. Private family moments were rare, snatched glimpses of normalcy in a life that was anything. He remembered a quiet evening with Priscilla and Lisa Marie, just sitting in the living room, watching TV like any other family. Lisa Marie, a tiny bundle of energy, had climbed onto his lap, her small hand reaching up to touch his face. For that brief moment, he was just Daddy, not the king. It was a fleeting, precious feeling, a taste of the ordinary life he sometimes craved so desperately. But even then, the phone would ring, or Joe would appear with an urgent message pulling him back into the whirlwind. The outside world always found a way to penetrate the walls of Graceland. Fans would gather at the gates, peering through the iron bars, hoping for a glimpse, a wave, a sign. He understood their devotion. He truly did, but it also meant he was never truly off duty. Even at home, he was on display. Sometimes, late at night, When the house was finally silent, he would wander the halls, the echoes of his own life bouncing off the elegant walls. He would stand in the living room looking at the grand piano, picturing the countless jam sessions, the laughter, the music. He would walk through the jungle room, tracing the lines of the exotic furniture, remembering the joy of creating such a unique space. But even in these moments, a sense of melancholy clung to him. He often wondered if anyone truly knew him, the real him beneath the layers of fame, the jumpsuits and the dazzling smile. Did they see the boy who sometimes felt overwhelmed, who longed for genuine connection, who worried about his health and his future? Or did they just see Elvis, the invincible, untouchable king? The pressure wasn't just external, it was internal too. He felt a deep responsibility to his family, to his fans, to everyone who depended on him. He couldn't let them down. He couldn't stop. The show had to go on, no matter the personal cost. Graceland, for all its splendor, echoed with the beautiful, heartbreaking truth of his life. He was loved by millions, but sometimes he felt utterly alone within his own kingdom. The golden cage at home looked remarkably like a crown. The sun beat down on the sprawling acres of Graceland, but inside, in the quiet dimness of his study, Elvis sought a different kind of light. He was surrounded by books, stacks of them on spirituality, numerology, Eastern philosophy, police procedures, and historical events. His thirst for knowledge was insatiable, a quiet rebellion against the superficiality of fame. He wanted to understand the universe, to find answers that the screaming crowds and flashing cameras could never provide. He'd often spend hours poring over texts, a pair of reading glasses perched on his nose. A rare moment where he wasn't on. In these moments, he wasn't the king of rock and roll. He was just Elvis Aaron Presley, a man trying to make sense of his extraordinary existence. But even in his solitude, the world often intruded. A knock on the door, a phone call, a request from the colonel. He tried to maintain his focus, but the reality of his life was a constant hum, a background noise that never truly faded. He had few true confidants. Joe Esposito was close, but Joe was also part of the machine responsible for keeping the Elvis machine running smoothly. His Memphis Mafia, the group of loyal friends and bodyguards who lived at Graceland, were fiercely devoted, but they often saw him through the lens of the king, the provider, the leader. It was hard to just be a friend when you were also the boss. He missed genuine connection, the kind where you didn't have to explain yourself, where you could just be. He missed anonymity. He fantasized about it, sometimes slipping away unnoticed into a small town, sitting in a diner, just listening to the conversations of ordinary people. But he knew it was a pipe dream. His face was too famous, his voice too recognizable. He loved horses, and spending time at the stables with his beloved horse-rising son brought him a peace that few other things could. He'd saddle up riding across the Graceland grounds, the wind in his hair, the thud of hooves on the dirt, the only sound. In those moments he wasn't performing, he was simply existing, connected to the earth and the magnificent creature beneath him. He also had a fascination with law enforcement. He collected badges, dressed up in police uniforms, and even trained with officers. It was a strange contrast to his rock star life, but it represented a craving for order, for justice, for a sense of purpose beyond entertainment. He admired the discipline and the clear lines of right and wrong. It was a world so different from his own, where the lines were constantly blurred by fame and adoration. One quiet afternoon, he was in the backyard, meticulously tending to his small vegetable garden. It was an unusual hobby for a superstar, but the feel of the soil between his fingers, the simple act of nurturing life, grounded him. He carefully pruned a tomato plant, humming a gospel hymn under his breath. It was a moment of true, unadulterated peace. Suddenly, a camera click broke the silence. He looked up to see a paparazzo peering over the fence. A telephoto lens pointed directly at him. The man froze, caught. Elvis felt a surge of familiar anger, quickly followed by a deep sense of resignation. Even here in his own backyard, he wasn't safe from the prying eyes of the world. He simply lowered his gaze, turning back to his tomatoes, a quiet dignity in his posture. The photographer, perhaps sensing the shift in mood or perhaps getting the shot he wanted, eventually retreated, but the moment was broken. The solitude was shattered. Later that evening, sitting by himself in the dark living room, a low lamp casting shadows on his face, Elvis reflected on the incident. It wasn't just the invasion of privacy, it was the constant reminder that he wasn't truly free. He couldn't just be. Every action, every gesture, even a moment of quiet gardening was potentially headline news. He thought about the irony. He had worked so hard to escape poverty, to achieve unimaginable success, and now that success had become its own kind of prison. He had everything money could buy, but he often felt poor in spirit, starved of genuine connection and simple moments of being himself. He picked up a guitar, a worn acoustic he'd had since the early days. Not a flashy stage model. He strummed a few chords, letting the music fill the quiet space. He wasn't trying to write a hit or to impress anyone. He was just playing for himself, for the pure love of it. The notes were raw, unpolished, deeply personal. In these quiet moments, when the world was asleep and the demands of Elvis Presley receded, he found glimmers of the man he truly was. A sensitive soul, a spiritual seeker, a boy from Tupelo who still loved his mama's cooking and dreamed of a simpler life. King's solitude was a heavy burden, but it was also the only place he could truly find himself, even if only for a few precious fleeting hours. The road blurred outside the limo window, a relentless ribbon of asphalt stretching from one city to the next. For Elvis, touring was a whirlwind of airports, hotels, sound checks, and then the main event. Stepping onto that stage, facing the roaring ocean of fans. Each city blended into the next, a kaleidoscope of faces and flashing lights. The adrenaline of performance was addictive, a powerful rush that masked the gnawing exhaustion beneath. His schedule was brutal, dictated by Colonel Tom Parker, who saw Elvis not just as an artist, but as a meticulously managed product. Kubies followed tours, tours followed recording, sessions, and every moment seemed pre-planned, leaving little room for spontaneity or rest. Elvis, ever the people-pleaser, tried to keep up, to fulfill every expectation. He'd spend hours on set, repeating lines, perfecting dance moves, trying to breathe life into scripts that often felt shallow and repetitive. He longed to make serious films, to challenge himself as an actor, but the studio and the Colonel preferred the safer, more profitable formula of light-hearted musicals. He'd smile for the cameras, say his lines, but a part of him felt stifled, his artistic spirit yearning for deeper expression. Another musical colonel, he'd once asked, a hint of weariness in his voice. Colonel Parker, ever the showman, would just puff on his cigar and say, "Son, they love you in these. Don't fix what ain't broke. Besides, it's good money, good for your family, good for your people." And that was always the trump card, your people. Elvis felt an immense responsibility. He had lifted his family out of poverty, employed a whole retinue of friends and relatives, and his success supported countless others. How could he possibly say? The weight of that responsibility was often heavier than any physical burden. The physical toll was immense. Long nights disrupted, sleep, constant travel across time zones. He'd often perform for hours, pouring every ounce of his energy into the show, only to crash afterward. Unable to truly unwind, sleep became elusive. A frustrating chase. He'd lie awake in opulent hotel suites, the silence of the room amplified by the ringing in his ears from the screams of the crowd. He began to rely on sleeping pills to find rest, and then stimulants to wake up and face the grueling schedule. It started subtly, just a little help here and there, but soon it became a crutch, a dangerous cycle that slowly chipped away at his health. He knew it wasn't right, but what else could he do? The show had to go on. One particularly demanding tour, he woke up in a hotel room in Las Vegas feeling utterly depleted. His throat was scratchy. His muscles ached, and his mind felt foggy. He looked at himself in the mirror, a ghostly reflection of the vibrant man he projected on stage. Joe Esposito walked in, carrying a tray with coffee and a newspaper. "Morning, boss. Big crowd tonight. Sold out." Elvis nodded, forcing a smile. "Great." He picked up the newspaper. His face was plastered on the front page, beneath a headline hailing him as the undisputed king of entertainment. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was the king, but he felt like a prisoner in his own kingdom. He spent the day trying to conserve his energy, resting, sipping tea, trying to prepare for another high-octane performance. He felt the pressure building, the expectation from millions of fans, the demands from his management, the need to always be on. That night, as he stood backstage, waiting for his cue, a wave of profound weariness washed over him. He felt hollowed out, a shell of the man he used to be. But then the roar started, the familiar electrifying sound of the crowd, and something shifted inside him. He walked out and the spotlights hit him, illuminating his sequined jumpsuit, turning him into a dazzling spectacle. The exhaustion faded, replaced by the familiar surge of adrenaline. He was Elvis Presley, and this was his stage. He launched into his opening number, his voice powerful, his moves electric. The crowd erupted a symphony of adoration. For those 2 hours, he was truly alive, truly present. He connected with the audience, felt their love, fed off their energy. It was a symbiotic relationship. They gave him their adoration, and he gave them everything he had. And for a fleeting moment, the weight of the crown felt lighter, almost bearable. But when the last note faded and he walked off stage, the cheers still ringing in his ears, the exhaustion returned with a vengeance. The applause felt like an echo in a vast empty hall. He was the king, yes, but the crown was heavy, and it was slowly crushing him. He longed for a simpler life, for moments of quiet normalcy, for a chance to just breathe without the world watching. He knew deep down that this relentless pace couldn't last forever. Something had to give. The constant demands, the endless touring, the manufactured persona, it was all taking its toll. Elvis felt like a kite buffeted by a relentless storm, his string held by unseen hands. His health was beginning to suffer, his sleep was erratic, and the quiet melancholy that often settled over him was growing deeper. He yearned for something real, something genuine, a connection that went beyond the dazzling lights and the roar of the crowd. It was during a grueling recording session in Nashville that a small, unexpected glimmer of hope appeared. He was in the studio working on a new album, trying to conjure the magic, but his voice felt tired, his spirit heavy. Took a break, stepping out into the hallway, needing a moment of air. There, sitting on a bench, was a young woman, a session musician waiting for her turn. She had kind eyes and a gentle smile, and she wasn't staring at him with the usual awe or desperate adoration. She just looked at him calmly. "Rough day?" she asked, her voice soft, not demanding, not starstruck. Elvis was taken aback. Most people either screamed or tried to pretend he wasn't there. He found himself responding. "Something like that. Just trying to find the song, you know." She nodded. "I get it sometimes. The music just hides. It doesn't want to be found." Her name was Sarah. She was a talented background vocalist, quiet but perceptive. Over the next few days, during breaks in the session, they found themselves talking not about his fame or his movies or the screaming fans. They talked about music itself, the soul of it, the way a melody could capture a feeling, the power of a lyric. They talked about simple things, the beauty of a sunset, a good book, the quiet comfort of home. Sarah listened, truly listened. She didn't offer advice or platitudes. She just allowed him to speak, to vent, to simply be a person. He found himself sharing things he hadn't spoken about in years. His early struggles, his fears about the future, his longing for a normal life. She understood, not because she was famous, but because she was an artist, too. and she recognized the passion and the pain that came with creation. "It must be hard," she said one afternoon, her voice barely a whisper, "to be loved by so many, but to feel so alone." Elvis looked at her. Truly seeing her here was someone who saw him. Her words struck a chord of deep resonance in his weary heart. It was a profound relief to have that unspoken burden acknowledged. One evening, after a particularly draining session, he was struggling with a complex vocal arrangement. He kept missing a note, his voice catching. Frustration mounted. Sarah, who was doing background vocals, stepped forward tentatively. "Mr. Presley," she began, then caught herself. "Elvis, maybe if you just try to feel the lyric, not just sing it, like you're talking to one person, not millions." He paused, looking at her. He'd had vocal coaches, producers, engineers, all telling him what to do, but her simple suggestion, rooted in genuine musicality and empathy, resonated differently. He closed his eyes, imagined singing the song to his mama or to Lisa Marie, a heartfelt whisper. He tried it and something shifted. His voice flowed clear and strong, imbued with a raw emotion that surprised even him. The take was perfect. "Thank you, Sarah," he said, his voice husky with genuine gratitude. "That was exactly what I needed." She smiled, a shy, warm smile. "Just glad I could help." Their connection was a quiet, steady presence in the chaos of his life. Sarah never asked for anything, never tried to push her own agenda. She simply offered understanding and a genuine appreciation for the man and his music. She reminded him of the pure joy of creating, of the soul of the music that had first drawn him in. It wasn't a solution to all his problems, of course. Colonel was still there, the demands were still relentless, and the crowd still screamed. But Sarah's presence, her quiet empathy, was a balm to his soul. It was a reminder that genuine human connection was still possible, even in the gilded cage of his fame. He found himself looking forward to the recording sessions, to the moments when he could talk to her, to simply be himself with someone who saw him as a human being first, and a superstar second. It was a small but significant shift, a ray of light penetrating the increasing darkness. This glimmer of hope, this unexpected friendship, was a lifeline, a gentle reminder that he wasn't entirely alone, and that the pure heart of the music and the man who loved it was still very much alive. The brief respite and connection Elvis found with Sarah were like a fragile butterfly, beautiful but easily crushed by the relentless machinery of his life. As the 1960s bled into the 1970s, the pressures intensified and the threads of his personal life began to unravel. The Vegas residencies became longer, the shows more demanding. Each performance was a high-wire act, a spectacle of energy and charisma. He poured everything into them, trying to outdo himself each night, to give the fans more, always more. But the strain was immense. His famous jumpsuits, once symbols of his theatrical flair, now felt like increasingly heavy suits of armor trapping him in a role that was suffocating. His marriage to Priscilla, once a fairy tale, began to show cracks under the relentless pressure of his career and his constant absence. He loved her, and he adored Lisa Marie, but the demands on his time and energy left little for his family. He was often on the road or secluded in his private world at Graceland, searching for solace in books or in the company of his inner circle. Priscilla felt increasingly isolated, longing for a husband who was present, not just a superstar. "Elvis, we need to talk," Priscilla would say, her voice laced with frustration. "Lisa Marie misses you. I miss you." He would listen, his heart heavy with guilt. "I know, baby, I know. It's just so much right now. The Colonel wants another tour. The studio's pushing for a new album. I'm trying to keep it all going." But keeping it all going meant sacrificing his personal life, his health, his very sense of self. The chasm between the public Elvis and the private Elvis grew wider, and he felt increasingly lost in the space between. The constant need to be on led to a dangerous cycle. To sleep after electrifying performances, he needed sedatives. To wake up and perform again, he needed stimulants. The mixture prescribed by doctors who catered to his every whim created a volatile cocktail that masked the pain and exhaustion, but slowly eroded his physical and mental well-being. His mood became more erratic, his energy levels unpredictable. One particularly low point came after a long stretch in Vegas. He returned to Graceland, not to rest but to face another round of meetings and demands. The house felt less like a sanctuary and more like a headquarters for the Elvis Presley Corporation. He wandered through the rooms, the familiar luxury now feeling strangely hollow. He saw Lisa Marie playing in the living room surrounded by toys. She looked up, her innocent eyes wide. "Daddy," she squealed, running to him. He knelt, embracing her tightly, inhaling the scent of her hair, and for a moment, the world outside faded. This, he thought, this is what truly matters. But then, his phone buzzed. "Colonel wants you in the office. He's got news about the next movie." Elvis sighed, running a hand through his hair. He kissed Lisa Marie on the forehead. "Daddy has to go work, sweetie. I'll be back later." He watched her small, disappointed face as he walked away, a fresh pang of guilt twisting in his gut. He sat in the Colonel's office, the air thick with cigar smoke. Colonel Parker laid out the next year's schedule. More tours, 2 new movies, another Christmas special. "Son, we gotta strike while the iron's hot. The fans want more." Elvis stared at the packed itinerary, each line item a fresh burden. He felt a desperate urge to just say no, to walk away, to reclaim his life, but the words wouldn't come. He saw the Colonel's relentless ambition, his father's worried face, the faces of his friends and family who relied on him. How could he just abandon them? He nodded a silent surrender. "Okay, Colonel, whatever you say." Later, alone in his room, he felt a crushing sense of despair. He looked at his hands, the hands that had once strummed a cheap guitar with such simple joy, now calloused from countless performances, trembling slightly from exhaustion. He felt trapped, caught in a cycle he couldn't break. The threads of his life, his marriage, his health, his true self, were unraveling piece by piece under the immense weight of the crown he wore. He was the king, revered by millions. But inside, the man was struggling desperately, searching for a way out of the gilded cage, even as the walls closed in. The warmth of the early days, the pure joy of music, seemed a distant memory, replaced by the cold, hard reality of relentless fame. The unraveling threads of Elvis's life made him increasingly desperate for peace. The touring, the movies, the constant pressure to be Elvis had stripped him bare, leaving him yearning for something beyond the superficiality of fame. He turned inward, seeking answers in spirituality, philosophy, and anything that offered a deeper meaning than gold records and screaming fans. His pursuit of knowledge became more fervent. He amassed a huge library at Graceland, filled with books on meditation, Eastern religions, numerology, even UFOs. He'd spend hours reading, highlighting passages, trying to connect the dots of existence. He sought out spiritual gurus, tried different forms of meditation, and explored various belief systems, hoping to find a path to inner calm. He often spoke about the meaning of life, about God, about the universe, to anyone who would listen. His friends and family, though sometimes bewildered by his intense discussions, listened patiently, witnessing his deep yearning for truth. He wasn't just casually interested. He was passionately seeking, searching for a way to quiet the restless demons that plagued him. One night, after a particularly exhausting show in Vegas, instead of heading to a party, Elvis asked Joe to drive him to the desert outside the city. Under the vast, star-studded sky, away from the neon glare and the constant hum of human activity, he found a temporary solace. He stood there for a long time, just breathing, looking up at the countless stars, feeling small yet connected to something immense and eternal. "It's beautiful out here, Joe," he said, his voice quiet, almost reverent. "Makes you remember what's real." He experimented with different ways to escape the Elvis machine. He often drove around incognito, wearing disguises, a fake beard, sunglasses. He'd pull up to a gas station, a diner, or a local store, just to observe, to be a regular person for a few fleeting moments. He loved listening to the ordinary conversations, the mundane worries, the simple joys of people living their lives without the burden of fame. One afternoon, he walked into a small, unassuming bookstore in Memphis. Disguised and unrecognized, he browsed the shelves, inhaling the scent of old paper and dust, a scent that felt comforting and real. He picked up a poetry book, something far removed from the scripts he was forced to read for movies. A young clerk, a college student, came up to him. "Can I help you find anything?" she asked, without a hint of recognition. Elvis felt a thrill of anonymity. "Just looking," he mumbled, his voice disguised. "Just enjoying the quiet." They had a brief, unremarkable conversation about books and the joy of reading. He bought the poetry book, paid cash, and walked out, a small smile playing on his lips. It was a simple exchange, but for him, it was a profound moment of freedom. He was just another customer, not the king. It was a taste of the normal life he so desperately craved. He also found solace in giving. His generosity was legendary, not just with money, but with his time and his compassion. He bought cars for strangers, paid medical bills for friends, built homes for family members. He found a sense of purpose in helping others, a feeling of making a tangible difference in individual lives, something more personal than the abstract love of millions of fans. One Christmas, he spent hours personally picking out gifts for everyone at Graceland, from the kitchen staff to his closest friends. He loved seeing the joy on their faces, the genuine surprise and gratitude. In those moments, he wasn't buying adoration. He was simply giving from his heart. Yet, despite his relentless search for peace, the underlying current of his life remained turbulent. The medications taken to cope with the demands were becoming more problematic. His health was declining, and the pressure from the colonel and the public never truly abated. The weight of being Elvis Presley was a constant, heavy presence. He knew he couldn't completely escape the life he had built. It was too big, too entrenched. But he never stopped searching for inner peace, for a way to reconcile the king with the man, the public persona, with his private soul. He was a seeker, adrift in a sea of fame, yearning for an anchor, a quiet harbor where he could truly just be himself at peace. His journey was a testament to his sensitive spirit, a heartbreaking search for meaning in a world that offered him everything but true tranquility. The journey for peace was a lonely one, often overshadowed by the escalating price of his fame. By the mid-1970s, the physical and mental toll on Elvis was undeniable. The rigorous schedule, the constant demands, and the reliance on prescribed medications had taken a heavy toll on his health. The dazzling image he projected on stage was becoming increasingly difficult to maintain. His once lean and vibrant physique was now heavier, bloated from water retention and the side effects of various pills. His eyes, once sparkling with mischievous charm, now often held a dullness, a profound weariness that even the brightest stage lights couldn't hide. He moved slower, his famous dance moves less agile. His voice, though still powerful, sometimes strained. The public, of course, noticed. Rumors swirled in the tabloids, questions about his health, his weight, his erratic behavior. Each whisper felt like a dagger, adding to the pressure, feeding his insecurity. He tried to hide it, to push through, to be the invincible king. Everyone expected, but the effort was monumental. Behind closed doors at Graceland, his trusted circle, Joe, Dr. Nick, his father Vernon, watched with growing concern. They loved him fiercely, but they were also caught in the immense web of his fame and their own dependency on him. It was a complex, heartbreaking. They tried to help to intervene, but Elvis was the king, accustomed to having his way, and the medications had become deeply ingrained in his coping mechanisms. "Elvis, maybe you should take some time off," Joe would suggest gently, noticing his increasing exhaustion. "Can't?" Joe Elvis would retort, his voice sharper than usual. "Colonel's got the dates booked. People are expecting me. I can't let them down." The fear of letting people down was a powerful motivator, a burden he carried constantly. He genuinely loved his fans, and the thought of disappointing them was unbearable. He believed that if he stopped, if he rested, if he wasn't Elvis every single day, the whole edifice would collapse. His spiritual search continued, But sometimes it felt like another form of escapism, a way to detach from the harsh realities of his deteriorating health. He'd spend hours discussing complex theories with his inner circle, trying to find answers, trying to understand why he felt so trapped, so alone, despite having everything. One particularly difficult night on tour, he struggled through a performance. His voice cracked on a high note. He stumbled during a move and the exhaustion was plain on his face. The audience, bless their hearts, still cheered, still loved him, but he knew. He felt the shift, the difference from his prime. Back in his hotel room, he collapsed onto the bed fully dressed. Joe rushed in, his face etched with worry. "Elvis, you scared us tonight. You need to rest. Really rest." Elvis lay there staring at the ceiling, tears stinging his eyes. I can't do it anymore, Joe," he whispered, the words barely audible. It was a rare admission of weakness, a raw display of the vulnerability he usually kept hidden. "I'm so tired of being Elvis." Joe sat beside him, his hand gently on Elvis's shoulder. "I know, boss, we all know, but you gotta help us, help you." But how? The Elvis machine was too big, too powerful. The expectations were too immense. He was caught in a current being pulled downstream, unable to swim against the tide. His body was failing him. His mind was clouded, but the show somehow still had to go on. He often spoke of his deep loneliness, even when surrounded by his entourage. He felt that no one truly understood the unique burden he carried, the isolation of being the king. He was adored by millions, yet he couldn't walk into a grocery store, couldn't have a normal conversation without being mobbed. His life was a gilded cage and the bars were getting tighter, the air inside more suffocating. Clung to the love of his daughter Lisa Marie, the one pure, uncomplicated joy in his life. He called her from the road, his voice softening, filled with genuine affection. She was his hope, his anchor, the reminder of what was truly innocent and good in the world. He desperately wanted to be a good father, to be there for her even as his own health spiraled. The price of fame was staggering, a personal cost that overshadowed all the glory and the riches. Elvis was paying it piece by piece, losing himself in the process. The dazzling lights, the thunderous applause, the endless adoration, it was all part of the tragic beauty of his life, a life lived entirely for others, leaving precious little for himself. The road to rock bottom is often paved with good intentions and the desperate need to please. For Elvis, the physical decline and emotional exhaustion reached a critical point. The signs were undeniable: the erratic behavior, the growing dependence on medication, the visible toll on his health. But amidst the deepening shadows, there were moments fleeting yet profound, where a stark clarity broke through. One such moment occurred during a concert in Indianapolis. He was on stage halfway through a song when he suddenly forgot the lyrics. His mind, usually so sharp, went blank. The music swelled around him. The band played on, but Elvis stood there, microphone in hand, a look of profound confusion on his face. The audience murmured, a ripple of concern spreading through the arena. It was only for a few agonizing seconds, but it felt like an eternity. He saw Joe Esposito's worried face from the side of the stage. He heard his own heart pounding in his ears, and in that terrifying void, a truth hit him with the force of a physical blow. He couldn't keep this up, he was losing himself. Somehow he managed to recover the band, picking up the slack, and he stumbled through the rest of the song, his mind reeling. The applause at the end sounded hollow tinny. He finished the show, the adrenaline pushing him through, but the incident had shaken him to his core. Back in the quiet of his dressing room, the usual post-show, chaos felt distant. He sat hunched over, his head in his hands. Joe entered, his face grim. "Elvis, are you okay?" Elvis looked up, his eyes clouded with a mix of fear and despair. I don't know, Joe. I just blinked. It's all too much. I can't remember things. I'm tired, so tired." He rarely admitted such weakness. Joe sat beside him, putting a comforting hand on his back. "You've been pushing yourself too hard, boss. Everyone sees it. Doctor, Nick sees it. Your daddy sees it. But what do I do? Elvis whispered, his voice raw. Stop. Just stop. What would happen to everyone? The band, the boys, my daddy Lisa, Marie, the fans. The weight of his responsibilities pressed down on him like a physical entity. We'll figure it out, Joe said, his voice firm. But you have to decide that you want to get better, for yourself, for Lisa Marie. That night, lying sleepless in his hotel suite, Elvis thought about Lisa Marie. Her innocent face, her bright laugh. Pictured her growing up, remembering him as a man who was always tired, always absent, always trapped. He didn't want that for her. He wanted to be a present father. A healthy, unadulterated joy he felt when he first sang. He thought about the gospel songs, the blues, the country tunes that had shaped him. He realized that the music, his true passion, was getting lost in the spectacle. Smothered by the demands, he knew with a painful clarity that he was walking a dangerous path. He saw the effects of the pills. The weight it clouded his mind dulled his senses and stole his joy. He was no longer controlling them. They were controlling him. It was a terrifying realization, but also, surprisingly, a liberating one. For the first time in a long time, he truly acknowledged the depth of his struggle. He saw the gilded cage, not as a beautiful symbol of success, but as a trap, slowly suffocating him. He wasn't sure how to break free, or if he even could. The forces at play were enormous. But in that moment of clear-eyed despair, a seed of resolve was planted. He might be broken, but he wasn't entirely lost. He still had a heart that loved, a spirit that yearned for freedom, and a deep-seated desire to reconnect with the man he once was before the crown became so heavy. This clarity wasn't a miracle cure, but it was a crucial turning point. It was the first step towards acknowledging his own pain, recognizing his limits, and perhaps, finally, seeking help, not just for Elvis, but for Elvis Aaron Presley, the man beneath the legend. He might not know the answers yet, but he finally knew the truth of his own suffering, and that in itself was a powerful, if heartbreaking, awakening. The moment of clarity, while profound, couldn't erase the years of relentless pressure or the deep-seated habits formed by fame. Elvis's struggle continued, a testament to the immense power of the Elvis Presley machine and the toll it had exacted. Tried in his own way to pull back, to regain control, but the current was too strong. His health continued to decline, and on August 16, 1977, the world lost its king. The news shattered millions. The thunderous roar of the crowds was replaced by a collective gasp of disbelief, then a wave of profound sorrow that swept across the globe. Graceland, once a private sanctuary, became a focal point of public mourning, adorned with flowers, candles, and tear-stained tributes from devoted fans who had loved him unconditionally. But beyond the headlines and the public grief, a different story resonated, one of the man behind the legend. For those who truly knew him, Joe, Priscilla, Lisa, Marie, his father, Vernon, and his closest friends, the loss was deeply personal. They remembered the sensitive soul, the spiritual seeker, the generous friend, the doting father. Priscilla, heartbroken, spoke of the sweet, often childlike man who struggled to balance his immense fame with the simple human desire for a normal life. She remembered his vulnerability, his deep love for his family, and his constant pursuit of knowledge and truth. Their marriage might have fractured under the strain, but the love for the man Elvis endured. Lisa Marie, though young, carried the echoes of her father's profound love. She remembered his laughter, his tender moments, the way he made her feel like the most important person in the world. He had poured every ounce of his available love into her, a shining beacon in his often darkened world. She knew the daddy who brought her gifts, not just the king who performed for millions. And the fans, too, in their collective sorrow, began to understand. They saw the news reports, read the stories, piecing together the narrative of a man overwhelmed by the very phenomenon he had created. They grieved not just for the lost performances, but for the man who had given so much of himself until there was nothing left to give. In the quiet days that followed, Graceland was filled with a poignant silence, occasionally broken by the murmur of prayers and memories shared. His friends, the Memphis Mafia, spoke of his immense loyalty, his quirky humor, and his boundless generosity. They remembered the simple moments, the late-night talks, the spontaneous jam sessions, the trips to the movies, the times when he was just their friend. His music, however, was his most enduring legacy. After his death, his songs resonated with a new depth, infused with the bittersweet understanding of the man behind the voice. When listeners heard Heartbreak Hotel, they heard not just a rock and roll anthem, but the echo of his own profound loneliness. When they heard Suspicious Minds, they felt the complexities of his personal relationships. And when they heard his gospel songs, they sensed his genuine, unwavering faith, his constant search for redemption and peace. His voice, rich and powerful, carried his story. The joy, the passion, the struggle, the longing. It was a voice that could ignite a stadium and soothe a troubled heart. It was the voice of a man who loved music more than anything, a man who truly believed in the power of a song to connect, to heal, to uplift. The pressure of being Elvis Presley had indeed taken a terrible toll. He was a supernova, burning so brightly that he consumed himself, but in his sacrifice he left behind an unparalleled musical catalog, a cultural revolution, and a legacy of love. He was the king, yes, but he was also a vulnerable human being, a sensitive soul who yearned for peace and connection amidst the dazzling, suffocating glare of fame. His story is a reminder that even the most celebrated among us are simply human, deserving of empathy and understanding. Elvis Presley's life was a grand, tragic, and ultimately heartwarming tale of a boy from Tupelo who became a legend, paying the ultimate price for his crown that continues to reverberate across generations, touching hearts and reminding us of the enduring power of music and the beautiful, complex man who created it. He may have been trapped in a golden cage, but his spirit through his music truly flew free.